Okay, in order to do a pay batch, of course, the first thing we need to do is to set up the employee records. So just load all your employee records by clicking this plus button. It allows you to load it from a current system account. So if the employee already has an account on the system, a user account to use the application, you can import it using their email address, or you can just type in all the fields. And finally, you can also do a batch import. If you were to load 50 or 100 employees, you can use it, you can import them using a spreadsheet. So once your employees are imported, access a specific employee record, and then on the first tab there's a lot of fields that you need to complete. Some of them are optional, but for tax reasons you will have to complete this properly. Several tabs are used for specific types of employees. HR notes, for instance, any warnings and those kind of disciplinary type notes would be placed in here, and even just consultation and notes and documents you want to upload are also done on this tab. And then the most important tab for payroll is the payroll tab. This is where we set up the tax detail for the specific employee. The office and the tax number is very important. The tax type, so this would usually be tax tables. It can also be a directive if this employee does have a specific tax directive. If you do set it to directive, you can enter the percentage here and the specific directive number down there. Otherwise you can ignore those fields. When it comes to medical aid dependents, just enter the total amount of dependents, including the taxpayer themselves, in this box, and the system will know that the first person is also always the taxpayer, and it will calculate the tax credits, the medical aid credits, in that fashion. It's important to enter the correct start date, especially if somebody has a new medical aid that they started in the current tax year, and then just configure whether this person pays UIF and SDL. Finally, enter their banking detail, their addresses, which can also be done on the first tab, and it's important to enter a start date if the employee started in the current year, because that will be used or may be used in the tax calculations. The basic payroll setup is where you configure which type of batches will be applicable to this employee. So you can probably make the employee a monthly on a monthly pay interval, and the pay type will in most cases be fixed unless somebody works on shifts or hours. So these two parameters link the employee to a specific batch. That's why you also select them when you create a new batch. Pay rates I'll ignore for now. They are used to configure pay rates for a large amount of employees, so that you do not have to apply increases per employee, but just to a specific pay rate, and that will filter through to all employees using that pay rate. Okay, so setting a basic salary will be the most common way to set up an employee. That's where the person earns a monthly salary, and it's possible to add commission to that, so that may be the basic salary. Once you've entered a salary, the system will tell you roughly what that person earns per day based on a 5-day-a-week schedule, and also their annual earnings. You can do increase calculations down here and apply increases, also see increase history, and then finally preview the payslip as set up here. Usually you'll either have a basic salary or a hourly rate and shift rate. You can enter the leave days, which helps you to manage leave in the system. There in fact is a specific tab for managing leave. And then when you do add payroll notes on the employee record, those notes will be on all payslips. If you need to add notes to a specific payslip, you'll edit that payslip and just add it onto that one as a once-off. Once you've saved this, you're done with the basic payroll setup. Now, in order to structure the payroll, you can manually add earnings and deductions. So an earning and a deduction can be used to, for instance, accommodate retirement annuities and certain allowances or deductions. And you configure each of these manually. Just select it as either an earning or a deduction, give it a description, and then either an amount or a payroll percentage. Don't do both. If it's based on a specific basic salary, the payroll percentage would be a percentage of the basic salary. If the company does contribute anything for this earning, you can enter it there and also specify it as a percentage of the basic salary. Then what's important is that you specify whether this is tax applicable. So that means percentage wise, does this earning have 100% pay as you earn deduction applicable, or is it not applicable for pay as you earn? So that information you will base on the tax law at the current time, and also whether there's VAT applicable. So that could be involved when assets or specific VAT type deductions or earnings are applicable. You need to enter the correct tax code for the specific earning or deduction. Currently, we do not provide a lookup, so you will need to reference the SARS documentation for this. And this will go through to your IRP5 and your tax reports, so it's important to enter the correct tax code. And then you can specify a start and an end date. Let's assume this specific deduction or earning is only applicable for a certain period. You can add a start and end date, and when payslips are generated in a batch, the system will honor these dates to decide whether this earning or deduction should be on the current payslip. You can add an external description and a reference. This means if this is related to a specific retirement annuity number or an external policy, then you can add that information in there. And finally, you can add a GL account, which is actually important because that's what the system does with those with these earnings and deductions. It has to allocate it to a specific general ledger account at the end of the day. So you can see that if it's an earning, it has to be linked to an expense account, because that'll be an expense to the company, like a salary and wages expense. And if it's a deduction, you can either leave it blank or you can link it to a control account, so that you can keep track of these deductions. Remember that there's always a double posting for salaries, where the payslip is posted to the GL and then afterwards the payment, the cash book movement is also posted, and all of these have to balance at the end of the day. So when you do set up earnings and deductions, you need to keep in mind it's not just for the payslip, it has to go to the general ledger. Okay, Then there's a tab for advances. Let's assume there are some cash book level bank, cash movement on an employee's account, like an advance in the beginning of the year, and they pay that back later during the month or specific months. You can address those not in earnings and deductions, but in this section where the actual employee liability account is affected, usually the bank account or a cash book account and this liability account, in order to ensure that they don't go to the tax side of your salaries. You can manually create a payslip for an employee. As stated before, it's not always a good idea. It just creates a margin for error, and it's a lot more work to do, but it's possible. Once you've created a payslip, whether it's manually or via pay batch, you can always edit them manually. And your payroll history, so your past payslips, are shown down here. You can click on any of them to open them, make changes. You can reopen a payslip, which should be done with care, because that'll affect posting to GL and all kinds of things. So it's best not done a month later or for any specific reason other than it's actually valid. At the bottom of a payslip, just for accounting reasons, you can see the general ledger transactions or postings for a specific payslip, and this is handy when you do earnings and deductions, also to analyze where these amounts will end up in your general ledger, and of course to ensure that the debits and credits do balance at the end of the day. If something doesn't balance or is incorrect here, it means the payroll setup was done incorrectly, or there's some error on the general ledger account. But that is fixed once off, and then you should not have a problem again. So keep that in mind. And that's about it for the specific employee record. Once you set up leave, there's a few parameters you need to put in, and often link the employee to a system account, which gives them that self-help leave management module. But once you've entered and set up leave, it's easy to manage all types of leave on this tab.